He walked in on the alien giantess while she was changing. What followed was unbelievable. The day started like any other at the research station on the distant planet. The human technician, Daniel, was used to unusual tasks, but nothing in his years of work had prepared him for what he would encounter. He had been assigned to check the power grid in one of the restricted habitats of place, where only the highest-level researchers and select alien personnel were allowed. It was usually quiet, almost serene, except for the hum of the energy conduits and the occasional soft chatter over the station's intercom. Daniel walked down the long corridor, his boots echoing against the metal floor. He carried a small toolkit, neatly organized, and his mind was focused on the task at hand. There had been reports of fluctuations in the power levels, and if not fixed, it could damage the life support systems. He reminded himself that mistakes here could be catastrophic. The air was slightly colder than usual, and the fluorescent lights above flickered briefly. He shrugged it off as minor maintenance issues, common things in a station this old. When he reached the door of the habitat, a small panel beside it lit up. Normally, he would have had to request access through the main control system. But today, the access code had been sent directly to him, apparently due to a scheduling update from the alien administration. Daniel didn't question it. In his experience, following procedure was safer than doubting it. He swiped his badge, and the massive door slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside, the chamber was larger than he expected. The ceiling soared high, supported by beams that gleamed faintly under soft lighting. The walls were lined with strange equipment. Tubes running in patterns that Daniel couldn't understand, filled with glowing liquids and humming softly. At first glance, the habitat seemed empty, perfectly still. Then he noticed her. At the center of the room stood a figure so large and imposing that Daniel's breath caught in his throat. She was an alien giantess, taller than anything he had ever seen, with limbs that moved with surprising grace despite their size. Daniel froze, unsure whether to step back or move forward. His instincts screamed that he was somewhere he shouldn't be, and then the unthinkable happened. He realized that he had walked in at the worst possible moment. She was in the middle of changing her outer environmental layer. Something akin to clothing, but alien in every sense. Daniel's mind raced. He had read the briefings on alien privacy protocols, the strict rules about interruptions, the severe punishments for disrespect. He knew he had broken every one of them instantly. The giantess froze as well. Her eyes, luminescent and intelligent, locked onto his. Daniel could see the mix of shock, fear, and confusion mirrored in her expression. He was utterly exposed, and so was she, yet neither could move. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the machines and the distant sound of his own heartbeat. Daniel's thoughts spun wildly. Should he apologize? Should he leave? Should he run? Every option seemed inadequate, every move potentially disastrous. He opened his mouth, closed it, and tried again. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. His words stumbled over each other, falling flat in the tense air. The giantess studied him for a long moment, her posture tense but not hostile. Then, slowly, she spoke in a voice that was both melodic and commanding, yet laced with genuine concern. "Why are you here?" Her words were not a threat, but Daniel could feel the weight of her presence. I was sent to check the power system," he stammered. "I didn't know anyone would be here. I thought it was empty. I didn't mean to intrude." His hand shook slightly. Not from fear of her size, but from the overwhelming awareness of the situation. Her eyes softened slightly, and she tilted her head as if trying to understand him. She wasn't angry, not in the way he expected. There was a moment of human-like hesitation in her gaze, an almost fragile vulnerability that surprised him. She too seemed trapped by circumstance. Neither of them had anticipated this encounter, yet it had happened, and now both had to navigate it carefully. Daniel's eyes darted around the room. There were symbols etched into the walls, glowing softly in alien script. Devices with lights blinking in complex patterns lined the perimeter. He had no idea what half of them did, but he knew that touching anything could be catastrophic. He raised his hands slightly, palms open, in a gesture of peace. "I won't touch anything," he said. I don't want to cause trouble, please. Tell me what I should do." His voice, though steadying, betrayed a note of genuine fear. He had trained for emergencies, for electrical failures and alien machinery malfunctions. But nothing had prepared him for a moment like this. The giantess took a careful step backward, giving him more space. Her towering form moved with surprising elegance, almost like a dancer adjusting her stance. Her voice was quieter now, reflective. "This is not acceptable," she said, though there was no anger in it. "Yet, I see your intent is not harmful." Daniel swallowed hard. Every instinct in him told him that he needed to apologize again, to explain more, to justify his presence. But he knew words could only go so far. Actions mattered more. He moved slowly, deliberately, keeping his hands visible and his body relaxed. He tried to project calm, hoping she would see that he was no threat. The silence stretched longer, filled only by the soft hum of machinery and the distant echo of his own breathing. Despite the tension, Daniel found himself studying her. She wasn't just a giant alien. She was an individual with fears, pride, and dignity. In that moment, he realized that first impressions could be deceiving. What he had expected to be a moment of humiliation and danger had turned into something far more complex. Suddenly, a faint alarm sounded in the corner of the room. A panel blinked red, signaling a minor system anomaly. Daniel's training kicked in instinctively. He knew he needed to address it before it escalated. "The power fluctuation," he said, nodding toward the panel. "I can fix that if you allow me." The giantess considered him for a moment, then nodded slightly. It was a small gesture, but it carried immense weight. She was allowing him to act, to intervene, even after the intrusion. Daniel moved toward the panel carefully, every movement deliberate. He worked methodically, aware that any mistake could be disastrous as he worked. He noticed her watching him not with suspicion this time, but with curiosity. Her posture relaxed slightly, though her size still made her presence overwhelming. Daniel felt a strange sense of connection, an unspoken understanding that they were both navigating an impossible situation together. Minutes passed, which felt like hours, as Daniel completed the repairs. The panel stopped blinking red, and the hum of the machinery returned to its normal rhythm. He exhaled quietly, feeling the tension in his body ease slightly. The giantess spoke again, her voice calm and measured. "You have skill," she said, "and respect. That is rare." Daniel blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. Praise from an alien of her stature was not something he had expected. "I'm just doing my job," he replied honestly. "I never wanted to intrude. He paused, searching for the right words. "I didn't know how serious this was for you." "I understand now." She regarded him silently for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, she inclined her head, a gesture that seemed to acknowledge both his apology and his competence. Daniel felt a wave of relief wash over him. The immediate danger had passed, and yet the encounter left a lasting impression on him as he prepared to leave. The giantess spoke once more. "Next time, ensure the schedule is correct." There was a hint of humor in her tone, subtle and almost human. Daniel managed a small, nervous smile, grateful for the lighter note after the tension. He backed toward the door slowly, keeping his eyes on her. With one last glance at the massive figure who had both terrified and amazed him, stepped through the threshold and let the door close behind him. The sound echoed in the empty corridor. Leaving him alone with his thoughts, Daniel knew that this encounter would stay with him forever. It was not just a story of fear or embarrassment, it was a story of understanding, of unexpected respect between two beings from completely different worlds. He had walked into a moment that could have ended disastrously, yet somehow it had ended in mutual recognition of skill, courage, and dignity. And somewhere deep inside, he felt that this was only the beginning of a story far larger than the confines of a single chamber or a single planet. Daniel's heart was still racing as he walked down the corridor, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter in the habitat wasn't over. The station's alarms had faded, and the hum of machinery returned to its normal rhythm. Yet his mind kept replaying the moment when the giantess had frozen mid-motion and stared at him with those intense, glowing eyes. He had thought he would feel relief after leaving, but instead, a strange mix of curiosity and worry weighed on him. He had barely taken a few steps when a panel at the end of the corridor flashed urgently. Daniel stopped, peering at the blinking lights. The station's protocol was clear. Any unusual signal in the restricted habitat must be reported immediately. His fingers hovered over the emergency comm, and he hesitated. Should he alert command? Or should he handle it quietly, like he had with the power fluctuation? His mind raced, torn between obedience and caution. Meanwhile, back in the habitat, the giantess, whose name he had learned was Lyra from the translator logs, was pacing slowly. Her massive feet made soft echoes on the metal floor as she moved, a rare sign of restlessness for someone usually composed. She had returned to her private area after the initial shock, but her thoughts were unsettled. A human had seen her in a moment she had never intended anyone to witness. On her planet, such breaches of privacy were deeply serious, punishable by fines, isolation, or worse. Yet, despite the rules, she had chosen not to punish him immediately. Instead, she found herself studying him, trying to understand why he hadn't been reckless or disrespectful. Lyra's mind returned to the moment of their encounter. His fear had been genuine, but so had his restraint. He had frozen, unsure of what to do, and yet even in that moment, he had acted with respect. That was unusual. Most beings, human or otherwise, reacted either with panic or aggression. This one had shown none of those instincts. Daniel, unaware that Lyra was observing him remotely through the habitat's monitoring system, moved cautiously. He knew he had technically violated protocol, but he also knew that walking away without addressing the anomaly in the power system could cause serious problems. He debated whether to risk returning to the habitat. He could wait for instructions from command, but something in his gut told him that Lyra might need him again. Finally, after several tense minutes, he made a decision. He would go back carefully and ensure that everything was stable. He double-checked the access panel, confirming that his credentials were still valid. Stepping back into the habitat, he was immediately aware of the scale and strangeness of the place. The glowing tubes, the hum of the machinery, and the alien technology all seemed almost alive. Yet this time, he was not entirely alone in spirit. Somehow, he felt Lyra's presence even before seeing her, a silent awareness that they were both trying to navigate a situation neither fully understood. When he rounded the corner, he saw her. Lyra was not in the same place as before, but she had not returned entirely to her private quarters either. She was hovering near one of the environmental panels, examining it carefully. Her posture suggested a mix of curiosity and caution. Daniel froze for a moment, unsure if he should speak first or remain quiet. Lyra noticed him immediately. Her glowing eyes focused on him, and for a brief moment, the tension between them returned. Daniel opened his mouth, but words felt inadequate. He tried again. I came back to make sure everything is working. I didn't mean to intrude earlier. Please, tell me if I'm doing anything wrong. Lyra regarded him silently, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke, her voice calm but firm. You returned voluntarily. That is unusual. Daniel nodded quickly, sensing both the caution and the curiosity in her tone. He moved slowly toward the panel, careful not to touch anything unnecessarily. As he worked, he felt Lyra's eyes on him, a quiet observation that was both intimidating and strangely reassuring. It was clear she was assessing not just his skills, but his character. Daniel knew that first impressions mattered, especially with a species so strict about privacy and protocol. As he adjusted the circuits and verified the readings, he realized how different this moment was from his normal routine. Usually, technical tasks were straightforward. Measurements, adjustments, confirmations. Today, each action carried weight beyond the technical. It was about trust. It was about proving that he could be careful, respectful, and reliable. Even in a situation that could easily turn disastrous, Lyra finally spoke again. You understand the consequences of intrusion, she said. Yet you act without fear of punishment. Why? Daniel paused. He had thought about this since the first encounter. "Because I didn't mean to disrespect you," he said. "And because I want to fix the problem. That's my job. I respect the rules, but I want to do what's right." Eyes softened slightly. She had not expected such honesty from a human or any being who walked into her habitat without warning. Many visitors would have offered excuses, bluster, or retreat. Few would have admitted their error and tried to correct it without being prompted. As they worked in silent cooperation, a strange rhythm developed. Daniel adjusted panels, checked readings, and stabilized circuits while Lyra moved around the habitat, ensuring the environment remained safe. The tension eased slightly as mutual understanding grew. Both were aware of the previous incident, but both were also discovering that cooperation was possible, even under extraordinary circumstances. After several minutes, the immediate task was completed. The lights steadied, the hum normalized, and the readings returned to optimal levels. Daniel stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. He had never been more relieved by the normal operation of a panel. Lyra regarded him quietly, her massive form almost serene. "You have skill," she said. "And restraint? That combination is rare among humans." Daniel blinked, a mix of pride and surprise crossing his face. "Thank you," he said simply. I try to do my best." Lyra inclined her head slightly, a gesture that seemed to acknowledge both his words and his actions. "This encounter will be remembered," she said. "Not for your intrusion, but for your response." Daniel felt a mix of relief and unease. Being remembered by a species so different from his own was daunting. He had expected reprimand, perhaps even punishment. Instead, he found a form of respect, measured but genuine. Before he could respond, the habitat's communication system beeped. A message from the station command flashed on the nearest panel, demanding a report of the incident. Daniel felt a surge of anxiety. Reporting the encounter would be difficult. How could he describe what happened without causing panic or breaching security protocols? He glanced at Lyra, unsure if she would allow it. To his surprise, she nodded toward the panel. "Be honest, but careful. Not all will understand." Her voice was calm but carried a weight of authority. Daniel nodded, appreciating the subtle guidance. He took a deep breath and began drafting his report, carefully describing the technical issues while omitting unnecessary details about her presence. As he worked, Lyra moved closer, observing silently. Daniel noticed small details he had not seen before. The subtle patterns on her skin, the way her eyes reflected light, the careful way she adjusted her posture even in moments of relaxation. She was not just a giant alien, she was an individual with thoughts, fears, and dignity. And despite the incident, she had chosen to extend trust. When the report was finally sent, Daniel stepped back, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and awe. He had entered the habitat expecting a routine repair. Instead, he had experienced something extraordinary, an unplanned meeting that challenged his understanding of respect, fear, and cooperation. Lyra spoke one last time before he left. "This does not erase what happened," she said, "but it changes its meaning. Remember this lesson." Daniel nodded solemnly, understanding that he would never forget this moment. As he left the habitat and the massive door closed behind him, felt the weight of the experience settle in. The encounter was far from over. He knew that the events of today would influence not only his work, but also the broader relationship between humans and this alien species. And somewhere deep in his mind, he realized that fear, respect, and honesty could form a bridge between worlds even when everything seemed impossible. After the incident in the habitat, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Lyra. Back in his small quarters, he tried to focus on his usual tasks, checking system logs, preparing maintenance reports, and reviewing schedules, but his mind kept drifting to the Giantess. He had seen her in a way no human was meant to see, yet he hadn't felt fear after the initial shock. Instead, he felt something he hadn't expected. Curiosity. Who was she really? What was her life like? How did her species function, and why had she seemed so human in her emotions despite her enormous size? The next morning, Daniel returned to work earlier than usual. He had received no formal instructions from command regarding the previous day's incident, and the uncertainty weighed heavily on him. As he walked down the corridors of the research station, he noticed subtle changes. The security protocols seemed slightly less rigid, almost as if someone had quietly adjusted them. He wondered if Lyra had used her influence to prevent any punishment or scrutiny. When he approached the habitat again, he noticed the door panel blinking softly. It wasn't an alert this time. It was a signal, almost like an invitation. His heart raced. Did she want to speak to him? Was this another test? He had no way of knowing. He swiped his badge carefully and stepped inside, keeping his hands visible. As he had learned to do, Lyra was there, as he suspected, though not in the same area as before. She was standing near a console, her posture relaxed but attentive. She didn't look angry or alarmed. Instead, she appeared thoughtful, almost contemplative. Daniel took a cautious step forward, and she turned her gaze toward him. Her eyes glowed softly in the ambient light, reflecting intelligence, curiosity, and perhaps a hint of wariness. "You returned," she said simply. Her voice was calm, deliberate, and carried a subtle authority. Daniel nodded, unsure how to respond. "I wanted to make sure everything is stable," he said. "And I wanted to understand more. About this station, and about you." His words felt awkward, but he spoke honestly. Lyra studied him for a long moment, as if weighing his intentions. "Most humans would not speak this way," she said. "They would apologize and leave, or act without thinking. You are different." Daniel felt a mix of pride and nervousness. He didn't fully understand why she saw him as different, but he sensed that honesty mattered more to her than protocol. She gestured toward a large viewing panel that showed part of the station's research area. Daniel walked closer, curious. Through the panel, he could see the complex systems she had been monitoring: energy flows, environmental adjustments, and biological experiments. It was impressive and overwhelming, but he tried to focus on what mattered. Lyra began to explain. "My role here is not what you assume. I am not a guard. I am a researcher, a diplomat, a scientist. My species evaluates others based on behavior, cooperation, and restraint. Human beings are interesting to us. Your species survives challenges that would destroy others, yet you often act without fear or hesitation." Daniel listened, fascinated. He had always thought of the aliens he worked with as distant, almost unknowable. But Lyra's words made him realize they were observing humans closely, learning from them, judging them. And somehow, he had made an impression. "You were not supposed to see me," she continued, "yet you did. And you behaved in a way that surprised me. Most beings in your position would have panicked or worse, tried to flee. You acted with caution, honesty, and respect. That is rare." Daniel felt a mixture of relief and unease. Praise from someone like her was not something he had ever imagined receiving. He wanted to ask questions about her species, about the research, about how she could be so massive yet move with such grace, but he hesitated. Words seemed inadequate. Instead, he nodded. I try to do the right thing," he said simply. "Even when I don't fully understand the situation." Lyra seemed to consider this. She moved closer, her massive frame casting a shadow over the consoles, yet her voice remained gentle. "Intent matters more than understanding sometimes," she said. "It is intent that guides behavior, that builds trust. That is why you are allowed to remain here, even after an incident that could have ended badly." Daniel swallowed hard. The reality of what she was saying sank in. He had not only survived a situation that could have had severe consequences, but he had also earned her respect. And not just respect in a superficial sense. He sensed something deeper. Lyra was measuring him, assessing whether he could be trusted in ways that went beyond rules and protocols. For the next hour, they spoke carefully, cautiously, each learning about the other in subtle ways. Lyra explained parts of her culture without violating the station's security rules. She spoke of responsibility, dignity, and the importance of restraint. Daniel shared his own experiences, the challenges of living and working far from Earth, the isolation of being on a distant research station, and the pressure to perform perfectly under conditions that were often dangerous. They discovered common ground in unexpected places. Both had responsibilities that weighed heavily on them. Both had to make difficult choices, often without clear guidance. Both had to navigate the expectations of others while maintaining personal integrity. And both, in their own ways, were curious about the other's perspective. At one point, Daniel asked about her size. "How do you function at this scale?" he said cautiously. "It must be difficult to live in a place designed for smaller beings." Lyra tilted her head. "It is not simple," she said. "But I adapt. My species has ways of adjusting to environments that are not built for us, and yet it is always a challenge, just as your species adapts in your own ways. Every being must find balance between self and surroundings." Daniel realized that despite the differences in scale, physiology, and culture, they shared the same basic struggle, finding a way to live responsibly, carefully, and respectfully in a world that often demanded more than they could comfortably give. As they continued talking, the tension from the previous encounter faded. Daniel no longer felt fear. He felt a cautious curiosity. Lyra no longer seemed as intimidating. She seemed complex, thoughtful, and surprisingly human in her concerns. They were two beings from completely different worlds, yet they had found a moment of understanding, a fragile bridge between species built on honesty, restraint, and respect. But even as the conversation deepened, Daniel could sense that there were boundaries they could not cross. Lyra could not fully reveal the nature of her research or the inner workings of her species, and he could not fully explain the human perspective without risking misinterpretation. The station itself, with its strict rules and oversight, acted as an invisible barrier. Yet, within that barrier, they found connection. Finally, Lyra spoke with a quiet authority. "This meeting is significant, not for what you saw, but for how you responded. Remember this. Actions, not appearances, define worth. Fear, respect, honesty, these are the measures that matter." Daniel nodded, absorbing her words. He felt a strange sense of awe. He had walked into a situation he could never have anticipated. And now he was learning lessons that extended far beyond technical skills or protocol. He was learning about judgment, trust, and understanding in ways he could never have imagined. When it was time to leave, Daniel took a careful step back. Lyra inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, approval, and perhaps even cautious friendship. He stepped through the habitat door, feeling the echo of their encounter linger. Outside, the corridors of the station seemed ordinary, yet he knew they were different now. He had glimpsed a world within a world, a perspective that few humans would ever experience, and he had survived it not by luck, but by honesty and restraint. As he returned to his quarters, Daniel realized that this was more than an isolated incident. It was the beginning of something larger story that involved trust between species, understanding beyond fear, and the possibility of cooperation in a universe that often seemed vast and incomprehensible. And though he didn't yet know what the next steps would be, he felt prepared. For the first time, he understood that respect and integrity were as vital as knowledge and skill, perhaps even more so when dealing with beings unlike himself. He settled into his chair and reviewed the data he had collected during his work, but his mind kept returning to Lyra. Her calm, measured words echoed in his thoughts. He realized that the encounter had changed him. He had faced a moment of intense uncertainty, acted with care and honesty, and discovered a bridge of understanding he had never expected. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel knew that this was only the beginning of a story that would continue to unfold, one that challenged assumptions, broke barriers, and proved that even the most unlikely beings could find connection through courage, respect, and honesty. The days after Daniel's second visit to the habitat passed slowly, yet they were filled with a quiet tension that neither he nor Lyra could ignore. The incident in the habitat had already sparked whispers among the station personnel, though no one dared mention specifics. Protocol demanded discretion, and Daniel was careful not to share details. He continued his maintenance duties, yet he felt an unshakable awareness that his actions and decisions were being watched, both by his human superiors and by Lyra herself. One morning, Daniel received a formal summons from the station command. The message was short and precise. He was to report immediately to the Central Operations Chamber. His stomach tightened as he made his way through the corridors. The summons carried a serious undertone, one he could not ignore. He wondered if the command had discovered the previous encounter in the habitat. Perhaps they viewed it as a breach of security, mistake worthy of reprimand or worse. When he entered the central chamber, he was not surprised to see Lyra waiting. She stood near the command interface, her towering form casting a calm yet commanding presence over the room. The other officers were already present, their expressions formal and unreadable. Daniel felt a familiar mix of fear and anticipation. He had learned to respect Lyra, but he also understood the weight of her authority. The command spoke first. There has been a breach in the habitat. A human entered without permission. Protocol requires immediate corrective action. The standard procedure is memory erasure to prevent any knowledge of sensitive areas from spreading. Daniel froze. Memory erasure, a process he had only read about in the station. Manuals was considered extreme, but necessary for certain situations. He swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Lyra stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. This human acted with honesty and restraint. He did not threaten the habitat, the research, or anyone within it. His actions demonstrated respect for life and for the protocols, despite the error. I recommend an alternative approach. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Lyra rarely intervened in disciplinary matters, and her recommendations carried significant weight. Her suggestion challenged the rigid rules of the station. For a moment, Daniel thought the command might reject her advice outright. But to his surprise, they paused to consider her words. "You understand?" Daniel said quietly, his voice trembling slightly, "that what I saw what happened was my mistake? I would accept any consequences if it keeps the station safe and Lyra protected." He tried to project calm, but his fear was palpable. The room was silent as everyone waited for a response. Lyra's eyes met his, and for a moment he felt a connection that transcended species. "Your choice demonstrates integrity," she said. "It is rare for a being to place the safety and dignity of others above their own. This is why I advocate for restraint in your punishment." After several tense minutes, the command deliberated. They weighed the potential risks of allowing Daniel's memory to remain intact against the rare display of trustworthiness and respect he had shown. Finally, one officer spoke. "We will grant an exception. Memory erasure will not occur. But this decision carries responsibility. Any further breach of protocol will not be treated with leniency." Daniel exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. The weight he had carried for days suddenly lifted. He had survived the most extreme disciplinary procedure the station could impose, not because of luck, but because of his honesty, integrity, and Lyra's support. Lyra inclined her head toward him, a subtle gesture of acknowledgement. "This incident," she said, "will be noted in your permanent record. Not as a failure, but as a demonstration of character. You have learned that restraint, honesty, and respect are as important as skill and knowledge." As the meeting concluded, Daniel returned to the habitat, still processing the events. Lyra was already there, observing the environment, her massive form moving with precision and care. Daniel approached her cautiously, feeling a sense of mutual understanding that had deepened over their interactions. "You have changed the outcome," she said quietly. "Your actions influenced not just your own fate, but the perception of humans within the station. That is significant." Daniel nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. He realized that the choices he made, even when unintended, had consequences that extended beyond himself. For the next several days, Daniel worked alongside Lyra more closely than ever. Their tasks were still technical, monitoring energy systems, stabilizing the habitat environment. But now, there was an unspoken bond of trust. Daniel had proven himself capable of handling extraordinary situations with care, and Lyra had recognized this. Their cooperation became seamless, each anticipating the other's actions, communicating through subtle gestures and shared understanding rather than words alone. Yet, even as their teamwork grew, Daniel sensed a larger responsibility looming. The incident had attracted attention beyond the habitat and the command chamber. Other departments were monitoring the situation, curious about the unusual human-alien interaction. Rumors whispered through the corridors of the station that a human had earned the respect of a high-ranking alien researcher. That trust had been established where protocol usually demanded secrecy. Daniel was aware that any misstep could undo the fragile trust he and Lyra had built. One evening, as he was reviewing system logs, Lyra approached him quietly. "There is more to consider," she said. "Our species and yours are under observation. This incident has implications beyond the habitat. Decisions will be made soon about interaction, communication, and future collaboration. Your role may be pivotal." Daniel felt a mixture of fear and responsibility. He had never imagined that a single accidental encounter could carry consequences for interspecies relations on such a scale. He nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "I'll do whatever I can to help. I don't want this mistake to cause problems for you or for the station." Lyra studied him, her eyes reflecting both approval and concern. "You have already demonstrated more understanding than many expect from your species, but the path ahead will be challenging. Trust is fragile, and mistakes can have consequences far greater than you imagine." Over the following days, the station experienced heightened security and closer monitoring of both human and alien personnel. Daniel continued his work, always aware that he was under observation. Yet he approached each task with diligence, careful to demonstrate competence, honesty, and restraint. He understood that his actions now represented more than himself. They symbolized the potential for cooperation between humans and Lyra's species. During this time, he noticed subtle changes in Lyra as well. She remained professional and composed, but there were moments of curiosity, even warmth, when interacting with him. Their conversations became slightly more personal, discussing problem-solving strategies, environmental challenges, and the ethics of research. Through these discussions, Daniel began to see the depth of Lyra's intelligence, her commitment to her work, and her understanding of responsibility. She was not just a powerful alien researcher, she was a being capable of empathy, foresight, and judgment that extended far beyond the rules of the station. One evening, as they concluded a particularly complex maintenance task, Lyra spoke quietly. "You have a choice to make," she said. "You may continue as you have, performing your duties, or you may take on a larger role. Your decisions, actions, and judgment could influence relationships between species, shaping outcomes far beyond this station." Daniel paused, absorbing her words. The weight of the responsibility was immense, yet he felt ready. He had already faced fear, uncertainty, and the threat of severe consequences. Now he had the opportunity to make a difference, to act not just as a technician, but as a bridge between worlds. "I'll do it," he said finally. "I'll do whatever I can to help. I'll take responsibility for my actions and work to build trust." Lyra's eyes reflected a faint glow of approval. "Good," she said. "The future depends on choices like yours. Courage, honesty, and restraint, these will guide you. Remember this, and you will succeed where others fail." As Daniel left the habitat that night, he felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. The incident that had begun as an accidental intrusion had transformed into an opportunity one that required him to act with integrity, intelligence, and care. He understood that his relationship with Lyra was more than personal, it was symbolic, representing the fragile but possible trust between species separated by experience, size, and culture. And somewhere deep in his thoughts, Daniel realized that the days ahead would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. But for the first time, he felt prepared. He had faced fear, navigated uncertainty, and acted with honesty and restraint. Now he had the chance to shape not only his own fate, but the course of interspecies relations, proving that even the smallest actions, made with integrity, could change the world. The following weeks were some of the most intense Daniel had ever experienced. Every day he worked alongside Lyra, monitoring the habitat, checking environmental systems, and assisting in technical operations that affected the entire station. But this work was different. Now it carried a weight far beyond routine maintenance. He understood that every action, every decision, reflected not only on himself, but on humanity as a whole. The trust Lyra had placed in him was rare, and the responsibility he carried was immense. Daniel's colleagues noticed the change in him. He moved more deliberately, spoke more carefully, and considered consequences before acting. Rumors of his relationship with Lyra circulated quietly, though no one dared speak openly about it. They could sense that something extraordinary had happened, something that went beyond simple human-alien interactions. Some were curious, others cautious, but Daniel did not let it distract him. He focused on his work and the trust he had earned. Lyra, too, seemed different. Her usual calm, measured demeanor now included moments of subtle encouragement directed at Daniel, though she never revealed personal details beyond what was necessary. Her guidance became more collaborative, almost mentoring. She offered advice not just on technical matters, but on decision-making, ethics, and the importance of patience in hyper-sure situations. Daniel absorbed every word, understanding that her experience and perspective were invaluable. One afternoon, an unexpected emergency occurred. A critical system in the habitat began to fail, threatening the delicate balance of the environment. Alarms blared, red lights flashed, and the hum of machinery became erratic. Daniel froze for a moment, heart pounding, but Lyra's calm presence anchored him. "Focus," she said. "Act deliberately. Panic will solve nothing." Working together, they moved swiftly but carefully. Daniel adjusted circuits, monitored energy flows, and stabilized subsystems, while Lyra coordinated the larger machinery, using her knowledge and strength to manage complex processes. The situation was tense, but their teamwork was seamless. Daniel realized that over the past weeks they had developed an unspoken understanding, communicating without words, predicting each other's actions, and compensating for differences in scale, speed, and experience. After what felt like hours, but was only minutes, the system stabilized. The alarm ceased, and the habitat returned to normal. Daniel exhaled, sweat dripping from his forehead, and looked at Lyra. She stood tall, calm as ever, though her glowing eyes reflected relief and approval. "Well done," she said simply. "Your skill and composure saved this environment. Not all humans could have performed as you did." Daniel felt a mix of pride and humility. The praise meant more because it came from her, someone who had witnessed his honesty, restraint, and diligence from the very beginning. In that moment, he understood that trust, once earned, could carry through the most challenging circumstances. After the emergency, Lyra spoke quietly, almost as if sharing a secret. "This incident or actions today will be noted beyond this station. Others will learn of your conduct, and it will influence how humans are perceived. Your integrity has set a precedent. You've proven that cooperation and respect are possible, even between vastly different species." Daniel's mind raced. He had never imagined that a single human's actions could have consequences on such a scale. Yet here he was, part of something larger than himself, shaping relationships and perceptions that could affect the future. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but he felt prepared. His experiences over the past weeks had taught him the importance of honesty, restraint, and deliberate action. As the days passed, Daniel continued his work with Lyra, but their collaboration evolved. They began to discuss broader ideas, such as interspecies understanding, ethics in research, and the importance of transparency in communication. These discussions were careful, measured, and often speculative, but they revealed a remarkable depth of thought and trust. Daniel realized that he was learning far more than technical skills. He was learning diplomacy, empathy, and the subtleties of building trust across worlds. One evening, after a long day of maintenance, Lyra and Daniel stood in the observation area, looking out at the vast expanse of space beyond the station. Stars twinkled in the distance, and the emptiness of the universe seemed both intimidating and awe-inspiring. Daniel felt a profound sense of perspective. In the grand scale of the cosmos, individual actions could seem small, yet they could ripple outward in unexpected ways, Lyra broke the silence. Do you understand now why this encounter, your mistake, your response was so important? Daniel nodded. Yes, he said quietly. I've learned that how we act even in unexpected situations defines not just ourselves, but how others perceive us. Trust, honesty, and respect matter more than anything else. She inclined her head. Exactly. You have proven that humans are capable of understanding, restraint, and cooperation. That is rare in a universe filled with fear and misunderstanding. Your actions today and in the past weeks have created possibilities that did not exist before. Daniel felt a sense of awe. The events of the past days, his accidental intrusion, the tense standoff. The emergency response had transformed into a story of connection, trust, and mutual respect. He realized that the encounter with Lyra had changed him, shaping not only his actions, but his perspective on life, responsibility, and the importance of integrity. In the following weeks, the station began to implement new protocols for human-alien collaboration. These policies encouraged mutual respect, careful observation, and cooperative problem-solving. Daniel's actions, guided by honesty and restraint, became an example for others. His experience showed that even in mistakes, there was an opportunity for learning, growth, and bridging gaps between vastly different beings. Lyra, for her part, continued to mentor and guide him, though always within the bounds of professionalism. Yet Daniel could sense a subtle bond that transcended the normal rules of interaction. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and potential disaster together and through it. They had built trust that was rare, even among their own species. One day, as Daniel prepared to leave the habitat after completing a particularly complex task, Lyra spoke softly. "Remember this," she said. "Every choice, every action carries weight. You have shown that even beings from different worlds can find understanding. Trust is fragile, but when it is earned, it can create possibilities that were once unimaginable." Daniel nodded solemnly. "I understand," he replied. "I'll carry this lesson with me, always." He realized that the encounter had not only changed his own life, but had the potential to shape the future interactions between humans and Lyra's species. As he walked through the corridors toward his quarters, he reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with a single mistake, walking into a habitat unannounced. That moment of fear and embarrassment had transformed into a story of trust, cooperation, and mutual respect. Daniel understood that life was unpredictable, and sometimes the most challenging moments could lead to the most profound lessons. He paused near a window, looking out at the distant stars. He thought of Lyra, her intelligence, her restraint, and her ability to see beyond fear and protocol to the essence of character. He felt gratitude not only for the trust she had placed in him, but for the lessons she had imparted, which would stay with him for the rest of his life. In the end, Daniel realized that this experience was more than just a personal story. It was a story of what was possible when beings acted with honesty, integrity, and courage. It was a story that would influence the way humans and aliens interacted in the future, proving that even mistakes could lead to understanding and that trust could bridge even the greatest differences. As he closed the door to his quarters that night, Daniel smiled quietly to himself. He had walked into a situation he could never have anticipated. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and potential consequences that could have ended badly. Yet, through honesty, restraint, and courage, he had not only survived, but he had created a path for understanding that would last far beyond the walls of the habitat or the station. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that this was just the beginning of a larger story. One where trust, respect, and integrity could change the course of relationships between worlds. The lessons he had learned, the bonds he had formed, and the choices he had made would guide him for the rest of his life, proving that even in the most unlikely situations, human beings could rise to meet challenges with honor, courage, and understanding.